Hi, Kevin Gerard here. I'm the author of Diego's Dragon, and I'm going to read a little chapter for you today, but I have to set it up first. In this chapter, Diego has been called to the library because the dragon statue that he won, which he calls Magnifico, has suddenly appeared in the library again. And in this chapter, it's the very first time that Magnifico comes to life. Up to this point, he's just been a statue about 18 inches tall. But the really fun part is that Diego is the only one who can see the statue come to life. He's in the library with the librarian and a bunch of other students, and all of them, all they see is just the dragon statue. But Diego is the only one who sees it coming to life. So, here we go. Diego was nice enough to bring his statue back to school today. You can see he's taken excellent care of it. Look at how the black finish shines in the sunlight. And the scales and horns. Look how magnificent they are. He truly is a very handsome dragon. Diego walked around Mrs. Coble's desk, stopping in mid-step. He shook his head, opening and closing his eyes. He stared at his statue, not believing what he saw. It seemed bigger, stronger even. His body shook as he walked around the group of students looking at his dragon. Although it maintained its silent stillness, something tugged at Diego's mind. He could feel the life bristling inside the plaster coating. He thought it strange that none of the other students seemed to notice. They had all gathered around, talking in small groups and reaching out to touch Magnifico, but no one had remarked about his bigger size and stature. "Diego?" asked Mrs. Coble, "are you going to leave your prize here for a few days, or do you plan to take him home tonight?" "I don't know, The words stalled in the back of his throat, almost gagging him. He looked in horror from Mrs. Coble to his dragon. The plaster that formed Magnifico's body shook and twisted. The horns bent, the teeth gnashed, and before Diego's eyes, Magnifico broke free from his shell. The dark, scaly face turned in his direction. The eyes blinked, the head shook, and a high-pitched, eerie wail poured out through the spiked teeth. Magnifico bobbed up and down on his muscular legs. He flapped his leathery wings, stretching them until Diego could almost see through the skin. Craning his head left and right, he looked around at the crowd of students standing around him. He threw a warning snarl at two students standing a little too close. A tiny stream of bluish flame shot forth through his sharp, gnashing teeth. One of the students held her hand up, pointing it at the statue. She leaned in, intending to touch the dragon on the nose. Magnifico responded by rearing back into a striking position. "No!" yelled Diego as he launched himself toward the student. He tackled her to the ground a split second before Magnifico lashed out with a vicious snap. Diego heard the resounding click of the powerful jaws as they clamped down on nothing but air. "Diego Ramirez," said Mrs. Coble sternly. "Have you lost your mind? Rosa merely wanted to touch the statue. You surprised me. I should think you'd want to share your wonderful prize." Diego released the girl. She stood quickly, adjusting her clothing, before moving far away from him. Diego stared at Magnifico, watching him playfully snap at other students in the library. He wanted to scream. "Stop it," he hissed. "Are you loco?" "No one in the room can see what I can," he thought. To the rest of them, Magnifico remained a statue, nothing more. He stood, shaking his head again. "If that's the type of behavior we can expect from you, Mr. Ramirez, I suggest you take the dragon home with you this afternoon." "See ya, stupido," said Ricardo, poking Diego in the back with a pen. "I thought you liked Raquel anyway." "I do," he said, clearly unnerved. "I wanted to save that girl from..." "From what?" asked Jose. "The magazine rack?" The two boys' laughter made Diego's nerves unravel a bit. They had left their games and raced to the library after hearing the announcement for him to report. Arriving seconds before Diego's masterful performance with Rosa, they nearly lost it when she and their good friend hit the floor of the library. "What's got you so spooked?" asked Ricardo. "Don't you see?" asked Diego. "See what?" asked both boys together. "Look!" Diego pointed his finger at Magnifico. En qué, amigo? The ill-mannered dragon watched the exchange between his guide and the two other boys. As well as a mysterious monster could, he laughed at Diego's predicament. Then he hopped across the table toward Ricardo, clacking his talons against the wood surface. "Don't you see that?" asked Diego. "Shh," said Mrs. Coble. "This is a library, not a playground." "Sorry," said Diego. He turned to his friends, whispering harshly, Look at what Magnifico is doing right now." Jose and Ricardo turned around. They took one look at the dark, motionless statue and then turned back to Diego. "You loco, muchacho," said Jose. "You better pray for forgiveness," added Ricardo. Before Diego could say another word, Magnifico moved to the edge of the table closest to Ricardo. Spreading his wings as wide as they would stretch, he filled his lungs with air. A second before he could belch out a fiery plume, Diego reacted. "Magnifico, no!" He tackled his friend to the ground. It was the second time in less than 5 minutes he had completely disrupted the peace and quiet of the library. "Mr. Ramirez!" shrieked Mrs. Coble. "What on earth is going on?" Ricardo pushed his friend to the side and stood. Both he and Jose hurled fresh insults at Diego. Then they stepped over him on their way to the library door. Diego lay there frozen, not believing anything that had happened since he entered the library. He even doubted his own sanity. He watched as dozens of students walked by him, looking down and snickering as they left the building. He turned and saw a twisting line of smoke curling up toward the ceiling. Mrs. Coble came around her desk. She walked resolutely across the room until she stood directly over Diego's prone body. She grabbed the lifeless statue from the tabletop, shaking it at Diego as she spit out her orders. "If I ever see this statue in this building again, I'll take it to the trash compactor in the faculty lounge and grind it into nothing." She set Magnifico back down on the table and crooked a finger at Diego. "You should be ashamed of yourself, Mr. Ramirez. You embarrassed us. You made a mockery of a great gift and of this library. Now you take this statue and keep it with you for the rest of the day. Then after school you take it home and don't ever bring it back here again. Is that clear?" Diego stared up at the librarian, stunned. "I said, is that clear?" Yes, Mrs. Coble." The librarian turned in a huff and walked back to her desk. Diego lay on the floor, not quite sure what to do. From his vantage point, he looked straight up at the edge of the table. He closed his eyes and sighed when he saw a tiny spurt of flame shoot out over the top of the wooden surface. Then he heard the unmistakable sound of sharp claws scraping across the old, rough wood. 2 seconds later, he saw Magnifico's scaly, spiked head peer over the top of the table. The dragon looked, cocked his head the other way, looked again, and then spoke to him for the first time. "¿Qué pasa, Diego?" So that's the end of Diego's little adventure in the library. It's a very fun book, and I know you'll enjoy reading it. So, thanks for watching me. Bye-bye.